Well, let's go to the book of Luke again, and let's continue our study on grasping the concepts of prayer, shall we? Luke chapter 11. Good to have several guests with us today. Had the opportunity to meet a couple of you before the service. Thank you for being here today and participating with us in our worship and our attempts to exalt God. And trust that you'll be blessed and challenged for being here today, but we thank you for your presence with us here today. Hope you get to meet a bunch of people. Now, we've been giving you this statement. Let me again put it before you. Prayer is the most vital aspect of a believer's life because it is the direct reflection of your spiritual condition. I guess I like to say it this way. If your prayer life is where it should be, the other areas of your life will fall in line. If the other things are out of line, if your prayer life is not where it should be, then the other things of your life are not going to be as well either. So Jesus, in teaching, responded to the disciples' request, Lord, teach us to pray. And again, I was reminded, Phil McClay told me this the other day, he said, they didn't ask, teach us to go out and proclaim your word. But he taught them that. They didn't say, Lord, teach us to do these miracles. He said, teach us to pray. And when believers understand the concept of prayer, it simply boils down to this. Prayer shows your spiritual condition. Your prayer life will be the direct reflection of where you are spiritually in your life. And in Luke's account of the Lord's Prayer, he summarizes several things. And it's briefer than Matthew's account for a reason. And in this summary, he gives us about 5 different areas or components of prayer. And we've talked about 2 of them. We've talked, first of all, about the relational component, or we could call this the praise component. And this is where he says, Father, hallowed be your name. When your prayer life is right, it means you're going to have the right relationship to God. It's in its place. And when you understand this relational component, and when your prayer life is what it should be, it's going to put the Father in his right perspective, and it's going to be able to keep it in that perspective so that as you navigate life, you're able to navigate it with a perspective of God, so that your choices really reflect what he would want for your life, called a relational component. We look secondly at the second component. We spent time on that last week. That is the program component. If your prayer life is right, it's going to keep you in a right relationship to his kingdom. And we talked about the kingdom. I'm not going to delve into all that today and where the church fits into that whole concept in eternity, but it keeps you in right relationship to what God is doing. And if your prayer life is right, then you're going to have that right relationship with his church. You're going to have that right aspect of my responsibility within that church, and his commission will be your commission. Now, I want to come to the next statement, and it's simply this. In Luke 11, verse 3, it says, give us each day our daily bread. Now, again, let me come back and give you the textual idea, if I can. In this passage, Jesus responds to the disciples' request to teach them to pray. That's what this passage is about. And as we look at it again today, from this passage, you can learn what Christ taught about prayer so that you can pray accordingly. Prayer is not the invention of what you want it to be. Prayer is doing what Christ instructed you to do. So if we say in one sentence what this passage is all about, it would simply be this. Christ expects his disciples to obey by grasping the truths about prayer. And that your prayer life then should be in relation to this. So far as we dive into this today, the aspects that we've seen in this thing is, okay, the relational component comes first. So that whenever we pray, there ought to be a sense of submission to God, appreciation or praise for who He is, and then the proper alignment of God in my life. And what happens is, if I'm right this way, then these things are going to fall into place. It's kind of like, I always look at it like this. It's the cross. Keep it right this way. It'll fall in line this way. Now, again, let's look today at what I call, not the relational component, not the program component, but let's add today the provision component to prayer. Give us each day our daily bread. This is one that in our culture in America, we don't appreciate because of what I would call modern technology or modern appliances. Had we lived 2,000 years ago when Jesus gave this, we would understand this far more. Because most of us today, if you're like me or like our family, most of the time we go, Monday's our day off, so a lot of times Monday we'll go and do our shopping. We head to the grocery store and we have a list of stuff that we need, and we get the list of stuff that we need, bring it home, stick it in the refrigerator, and it lasts usually for the week, right? Well, remember 2,000 years ago, living in the climate in which Jesus lived, they did not have refrigeration. So you didn't go buy a gallon of milk and bring it home, put it in the refrigerator, and it would last all week. It didn't work that way. You didn't have bread that was bought and made like it is today with the preservatives and the ability that we have to freeze it or to put it in a refrigerator and you could keep it all week. What you would do if, in most cases, if you lived 2,000 years ago, husband would go out, work on the farm, or in the city, depending on what the occupation was. And in most cases, you as a wife would head to the market, and you would head there every day. And what you would do on that day is you would buy the provisions that you needed for the day. You would do the same thing you do now, only you only had to organize it for one day. So you would head and you would go to the baker, and there at the market, the baker would have his bread that he made fresh, and you would buy that enough bread to get through the day. And so you have the statement, give us each day our daily bread. Because you would purchase it daily. You did not have modern appliances. And so this passage, when we read it as in an American culture like we live in, we tend just to buzz over this and don't see the significance or the uniqueness of this particular statement. Give us each day, and I could read it this way, give us each day our daily needs. And in that day, that's exactly how they lived. They lived day to day based on what they needed. And Christ was teaching his disciples here to ask God to provide for their daily provision of food. It's twofold here in this sense. They're asking, and what Christ is teaching is you need to trust Christ for the ability and the funds that you need to be able to go and purchase the daily bread. And then you need to pray that as you go and make those purchases, that Christ would provide what was needed. And what he's teaching here is there is a dependence. There is a reliance on the part of the believer for the daily, everyday needs of life. The most basic being, you got to have food to survive. And in that day, you had to have it every day. And so what Christ is teaching his disciples here is Christ ties, or Christ links together here, to God as the one who is ultimately the provider of daily needs. And I'm not sure we live like that. It's kind of funny, we don't get paid like that. In that day, if you would have went out and worked in the field, you would have received your day's wages. We get paid sometimes monthly. Some of you get paid monthly. Some of you get paid every other week. Most of you get paid weekly. Very few of you get paid. You come to work, At the end of the day, you go to the person who's the boss and you say, okay, I put in 8 hours, and he'd give you 8 hours of pay. We don't even do that today. So there's so much in our culture that has changed from this particular culture, and it causes us just to lose the realization of how dependent we are every day for the daily needs of our lives as believers. And we suffer because of that. We somehow think that because we have these jobs, because we get this pay, we're kind of entitled to it, that all of this falls into place. And we kind of live our lives each day with a lack of a realization of how much we need God every day for all of our needs and for every step of the journey. How do you resolve that? The answer is prayer. Because prayer brings us back to the most basic relationship, and this is where you have the provision aspect, and this is part of keeping my relationship with Christ in line. Now, if you'll notice up until this point in this particular prayer, as Luke gives it, every one of these components so far has dealt with the subject of my life in relationship to God. The relational component, Father, hallowed be your name. The program component, your kingdom come. The provision component, give us each day the needs for today. And help us to realize that we live dependent upon you every single day of our life for every single aspect of our life. I love our country, as I think you do. I notice that, by and large, people try to come to America still today. I don't see a lot of our kids here from our place going to other countries for education. I see a lot of kids from other countries wanting to come here for education. We have something that has been unique. We have a country that has been blessed beyond measure. It's based upon a concept that we call capitalism. And it's based upon a concept of the ability of the individual to do and to accomplish whatever they set out to do. The American dream, if you would. You can be in our country whatever you want to be. You can accomplish in our country whatever you want to accomplish. And I love our country. But one of the things that it breeds is self-dependence, self-reliance, and self-trust, and even self-exaltation. And sometimes the concepts of a country, you lose sight of the necessity of the believer to live in dependence upon God. That's why I think as we walk through these times of recession, they're good for us. They're necessary for us because it brings it back into perspective. You need God every day of your life. And you need to trust Him for every step and every provision of the journey. My son-in-law and daughter recently had a little baby. The little one would not survive if mom and dad did not take care of the daily needs of his life. That's how dependent we are on God. If you don't spend time in prayer, if you don't properly develop your prayer life, this is what's going to happen in your life. You're going to lose sight of who God is. And when you lose sight of who God is, you're going to lose your anchor of who you are. If you don't properly develop your prayer life, you're going to lose sight of the program that God has instituted, your kingdom come. and you're going to get out of sorts with the program that God has developed. And it's not that you're out of sorts with the program that God develops, it's your prayer life is broken down. And if your prayer life breaks down, then you're going to lose this perspective of your reliance on God for everyday needs. And what's going to begin to creep in is self-sufficiency. I can live my life without God. When you begin to walk the trail of self-sufficiency, let me tell you what's going to happen, because right behind the door of self-sufficiency lies the door of self-gratification. And you are going to seek for fun. You are going to seek the fulfillment of your needs without God. And that is going to develop a life that is going to break down at some point severely. And you are going to begin to experience the pain that self-governance brings. Just like Adam and Eve, when God said, do this and don't eat of this, when they broke it down to saying we can do that, they went after that, they ate that fruit, it broke down for them because they lived a life of self-governance. Where does self-governance come from? It comes from self-reliance. It comes from self-sufficiency. It is the failure to realize that you walk a journey and you are dependent upon God for every aspect of your life, every day of your life, and every step of the journey. Give us each day what we need for the day. It is called reliance upon God as opposed to self-reliance. I've watched this over the years in the lives of people. One of the benefits now that I have of being in ministry as long as I have is you see so many people go down different trails. And you know what's going to take place when you begin to walk that trail. And I see this in the lives of God's people. You need to understand that prayer ties you to the provisions of God. Prayer is what you need to do so that you realize every step of the journey is supplied by God. Prayer is what you do so that you don't become self-reliant, because self-reliance leads to self-gratification, and self-gratification leads to self-governance, so that you're doing what you want to do thinking it's going to bring you fun. And it's going to bring you enjoyment, when in reality it's going to bring you a lot of pain, a lot of trouble, and a lot of difficulty that you're going to have to go back and deal with. You're going to have to undo the trail, and you're going to have to get back to the point where you're reliant on God. So we read this and we think, oh, they need prayer. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in heaven as it is on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Cool. But you don't realize is that if I don't live dependent on God for the provisions, that I develop the life of self-sufficiency. The life of self-sufficiency leads to self-gratification, and self-gratification just opens the door wide open to the self-governance of your own life. And if you make the decisions that you want to make based upon you and not God, you're not going to be happy where you end up. And so I call you and I bring you back to this. Do you realize how dependent you are upon God for the everyday provisions of your life? This isn't just so you have bread to eat. This isn't so you have food on the table. This isn't just so that you have oil to heat the house. This is a perspective in life that goes far deeper. This is so that you keep your life lived in such a manner that you realize how much you need God to prevent you from making a train wreck out of your own life. And where does it all start and where does it all begin? There's this aspect of prayer that's called the provision aspect. I live each day dependent upon God. So not only do I pray, Lord, supply this bread that we need each day, but God, supply wisdom for the choices and the decisions that will be made. God, supply the needs for the friendships that will be cultivated. God, supply the opportunities to present the truth. I live dependent on you. I think back to this, and let me just give you a little story, and let me give you a personal journey if I can. We'll quit with this. I think back to when we, as a church, made programs out of so many things. Give you an example of what I mean. Thursday night is church visitation night. Remember that? Thursday night is church visitation night. You all come out. That sounds great, doesn't it? But what we did was we programmed things. And I don't know how to totally get this across to you, but it's like this. Now we're going out and we're going to share the truth, and we're going to be deliberate, and we're going to knock on doors and share the truth. I had a couple of them come to my house yesterday. I didn't have time to, knew who they were. I knew what they were packaging. I knew what they were presenting. Came to the door and wanted to give me all the literature. And I know the thing, if I take the literature, they're coming back in 2 weeks. I know the whole. I said, I'm sorry. I don't have time to talk to you. I'm not interested in your literature. And that is a program that they go through. Let me break down the program, and let me say this. If we can somehow deprogram this and realize this, if you will pray, give us this day our daily bread, and you understand that you live, this is a concept where you as a believer are living in reliance upon God as opposed to self-reliance, this program, you will see this. God, take my life today and may it be lived so that it demonstrates a life that is totally committed to you, totally dependent on you, and totally reliant upon you to accomplish your will today for my life. And whether it be in the area of the provision of food, but what you're going to find is this. If you will pray this and you will live this, you are going to find that you don't need a program, because God is going to open up doors of opportunity for all of you, and He's going to bring people to you that are prepared to hear the truth. Been amazed at this. And how God will use you. Because this isn't just, I want you to maintain this perspective. This isn't passive. This is a very active thing in your life where you are saying, God, I'm living my life down to the very necessity of I am praying for my daily needs to be met because I'm living in total dependence upon you. And this puts you in the perspective of your life is then not self-governed, it is God-governed. It is God-dependent. It is God-sufficient. And when you get a believer who understands the relational aspect, understands the program aspect, and now understands the dependent aspect, you're getting a believer who is putting themselves in a position where God can use you to accomplish whatever He wants to accomplish through your life. This is very active in its action here. This is the believer, through prayer, positioning themselves to be used of God. Why? Because I'm even dependent upon Him for my food. And if you're dependent upon Him for your food, then you get dependent upon Him for every aspect of your life. Now, here's the person that God can take and say, I need you here. Or I need to bring this group of people to you. Can I tell our story, Mom, where you came to me how long ago and said, you got to pray? Can I tell that? I can? You can say no, Mom. Come here. You'll help me tell it. I can do this to my mom. She cooks for me every week. Tell them what you came to me and asked me to pray for a number of months ago when you said, I got to be used.
Well, I just felt like the I wasn't doing anything, I was helping in school and senior saints and things like that, but I wanted something more personal in my life. And this was around Thanksgiving time. I went home from church on a Wednesday night, and I answered my phone, and I couldn't even understand the person that was on the phone. They were crying so hard. And finally I got through to find out who it was. And she was in grief over losing her mom, and just so many things. And so I invited her up to the house, and we've talked and talked and talked, and we've been on the phone, and the
batteries went dead on the phone, just so you know.
I couldn't help that. But anyway, the Lord has been able to, I've gotten her into reading the scriptures. I've gotten her to see how God sees her. I've gotten her to see her purpose in life. And she still goes through some struggles and things like that. And this week, I got a call last Friday night, and it was really desperate. And so I said, look, come on up. So she did, and every day this week I tried to call, and I could not get her. You don't know how much I prayed for that all week, and she finally called me again yesterday, and God has really answered some prayers, and it's just been really neat. Praise the Lord for that.
But the point I make to you today is this. Mom came to me and said, look, I can't not live and have impact. You got to pray that God will open doors for me and God will use me. So when I got to the house last Sunday for lunch, Mom starts telling me the various stuff that is going on without telling me who everybody is or any of that. And I said, Mom, you want me to stop praying now?
I said no.
Okay. But the point is this. As you begin to catch this concept and you begin to live your life not dependent upon what you want, but you understand that I live my life every day dependent upon God. That now God, not through some program, but through opportunities, I'm telling you, God is going to send people to you that you can minister to and you can help, because when you are a believer who is not self-reliant, then self-reliance opens the door to self-gratification, which opens the door to self-governance. God can't use the person who is governed by self. He's going to break you. You're headed for Ron's office. Okay? When you walk the trail of self-governance, you are walking a trail that is not good. And as a believer, God is going to take you and God is going to break you down so that He can rebuild you. And what He wants from us is He wants a people who understand, I am so dependent on God that I have to ask Him for my daily bread. And when God has a believer who lives their life dependent on Him for even their daily bread, He has a believer that He can use to accomplish whatever He wants to accomplish. And you're going to find this in addition to it. Because self-reliance leads to self-gratification, leads to self-governance. God-dependence leads to God bringing gratification to your life. And it leads to God governs or governing your life. And I will tell you this. When God has you to that extent, to know that you are used of God will bring the ultimate joy to your life. So we pray, give us this day our daily bread.